bottom to top is always the best route.
All right, bottom to top it is. Why don't we start with, by category, we're going to go with our F-graded quarterbacks. These are guys that it doesn't matter what they do. They're never going to improve to the point they can win a Super Bowl. They're done. Their time is over. Basically no chance whatsoever. No light at the end of the tunnel. This guy deserves to be at the bottom, and that's where they are. And by they, I mean he, and by he, I mean Eli Manning. Ranking in at number 34 on our power rankings here. Eli Manning for the Giants. Look, whatever magic I think Eli had in New York is gone. You're not necessarily going to have any kind of renaissance out of him. He's not young enough to the point where I see some kind of improvement coming to Eli. At this point, his game's his game.
You are the future of the dark side. The hate is strong. Eli Manning is a 2-time Super Bowl winning champion quarterback.
And those times are long
Super Bowl
gone,
MVP.
Drew. What has he done in the
and
past
just put
5
him down
years?
at F?
Yeah.
F?
Uh-huh.
Lonesome by himself?
Especially bad when you look at
There's
the other two guys he was drafted with great at.
There's other players down there, man.
Like who? Who would you put there?
I mean, I'm just saying. There's other players down there.
Like Blaine Gabbert? Well, too bad he didn't make our list. Not important enough of a quarterback.
People that don't have jobs anymore.
Eli Manning, to me, is the worst starting quarterback in the league right now. It's both regression of his skills, not to mention, I believe, effort, especially when you look at the Giants when they were bad. The guy absolutely gives up on plays. He's not the guy he used to be, especially when they won all those Super Bowls. I don't think there's a defense you can put around him. I don't think there's an offense you could put around him where you could legitimately say the Giants are going to win a Super Bowl this year. And we've seen that.
Of course, I'm kidding by all means. And trust me, you guys all know if you watch this show that I think Eli Manning still has a little bit left in the tank. I think that he's still possible of doing it. But if you look at these last 2 years, there is no hope. I mean, that's the reason why the Giants have moved on. You don't move on from a 2-time Super Bowl winning champion. You don't move on by a multiple-time Super Bowl MVP champion. I mean, you just don't do that. And the fact that they were saying, hey, you're done, well, buddy, you're more than likely done. So it would literally be an act of a god, a miracle, to
like a cybernetic arm or something. They just cut his right arm off and put a robot one on there.
You bring up his want to play, his ability to still do it. I mean, when you watch him fall on the ground before the hits hit him, and I get he's saving himself, he's trying to stay healthy, but you know what, man? This is football.
Sometimes you got to make a play. You got to make something happen.
This is what happens, Maybe you duck the guy or you try to move out of him. I mean, no one's expecting you to, run 50 yards, but maybe that first guy misses. Maybe you have a chance to go to the your next target. As much as I laughed when you gave me this list, it completely makes sense. These last 2 years, if someone deserves to be on the very bottom as far as a starting quarterback in the NFL, it's Eli Manning.
And Scott says, has Eli ever really been that guy, though? I believe he has been, especially when you look at he's won 2 of them, like you said. He's made some clutch throws in clutch situations. Not to mention, only seems to be Tom Brady's kryptonite. I think he used to be that guy. He used to be a good quarterback. I think he gets kind of a bad rap because he's had a bad back 9 of his career, and it's not going to get any better. I don't think there's any kind of reasonable expectation we can look at Eli and say he's gonna do something different and it's going to lead to more success. At this point, he is what he is. He's a bridge quarterback that's going to hopefully, make this transition to Daniel Jones as smooth as possible for the Giants.
Yeah, Scott, to be honest with you, he was that guy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, like I said, he said 2 Super Bowls, man. He is that guy. He was that guy. Trent Dilfer was that guy.
Once can be a fluke, right?
For the Ravens at one point. They was that guy.
Right.
But, if we're talking about now, we're talking about the last couple of years, I mean, Eli's not that guy. That's why Daniel Jones was their first pick.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about our next category in the D's here, Drew, which these are guys that we say right now, if you take them, you can put them on the best team in the NFL, and they're not winning a Super Bowl, but there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Like maybe their game can improve. Maybe we can see some things happen with them, or they can develop, and they can go win a Super Bowl in the future. I think at the bottom of this tier has to be Josh Rosen. I get it. Everyone's sitting there saying Miami made this great caper by trading a second-round pick to bring in a former first-round quarterback. But last year, as bad as things were in Arizona, there was never really a point where I was watching Josh Rosen. I was like, man, that's a good throw. If we just put him on the right team, he's going to develop into the kind of quarterback that wins a Super Bowl, or he's going to be able to make some things happen. We didn't really have those kind of flashes with Josh Rosen that we had out of some of these other young quarterbacks. That's why, to me, he's the 33rd best quarterback in the NFL right now. He has the most to prove out of any of these young guys.
And Owen's with you. He says he's washed up now with Eli Manning. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, like I said, it's going to take a miracle for that guy to find a different home and to become anywhere like he was, in the early 2000s. As far as Josh Rosen goes, I think this is kind of a little bit of a who you have around you scenario. I mean, the guy's a rookie last year. He played all 15 games.
I think he played 14.
14
It might
games?
have been 15. I can't remember.
So ever
it
since he
might have
be-
been the second game he came in. What's
How's
going
it
on,
going, Brian? So ever since he became a starter, he started every single game. You never heard anything about him complaining about his offensive players, his offensive line not holding, no one making plays beyond him. I mean, this guy was a pro's pro in a scenario in the sense of he kept his mouth shut, he practiced every week, played every game, stayed healthy.
Didn't help him, though, did it?
No, but that being said, he couldn't make Larry Fitzgerald better. You know, he couldn't make
Christian Kirk or David Johnson.
Or David Johnson better. I mean, I don't know if that team was just destined to fail, but he failed. And they became the number 1 pick overall in this last year's draft, which made him lose his job. Now he's got another chance to start in Miami. We all know that Miami, regardless, does not have a perfect scenario. So it's going to be a struggle for Rosen to get anywhere near the C and B and A category on our list.
No, I agree. And like I said, he's got the most approved. This doesn't just have to do with how successful you've been. Yeah, we've picked up 2 quarterbacks that have been on losing teams these past couple of years, but it's not just about how you succeed. It's how you look when you do it. And Josh Rosen did not look – there was no kind of beauty in any of his play that you're like, man, we've got something here. This kid could actually wind up growing into the quarterback we need him to be. I'm not saying he can't be that guy, but we haven't seen it yet. That's why Arizona was comfortable moving on after 1 year. Now, our next guy, which, again, might be a little bit of a head-scratcher for some guys because he has had some success. On my list here, Lamar Jackson, Drew, also a D, because even though he was winning games, he had an amazing defense at the Ravens. He had an amazing running game, an amazing offensive line. He had some receivers in Crabtree and John Brown who could make things happen. Tons of tight ends with some effect. But still, we weren't seeing the passing yards. Usually, if you're going to succeed in the NFL, you have to be able to throw. And out of anyone in the NFL, I think he probably has the worst arm out of a starting quarterback. I think when it comes to accuracy and everything else, he just doesn't have the kind of tools that it takes to be an NFL quarterback. That's why I have my doubts about him going forward.
Now, Scott said Rosen needs to have a good number 1 to learn behind. Unfortunately for him, that's not going to happen. He's got Ryan Fitzpatrick will probably start as many games until he's losing. But Tucker said he didn't have a line and he won't have one in Miami. But let's not forget, that doesn't mean that he has the right to not be good. Doesn't mean he has the right not to make plays. Think of a game that Arizona put up 30 points. You can't think of one. They had the lowest scoring offense. And you can sit there and blame his offensive line all you want, but NFL quarterbacks that are destined to be good, the ones that are going to take that next step up to get out of in our D category, you are going to some every now and then get 30 points. You're going to somewhere put that performance out there and go, he has something.
And Brandon says, no disrespect to Lamar, but he sees him more as a run-first kind of QB. Absolutely, he's a run-first guy. And we've seen run-first guys not really succeed in the NFL. There have been 1 or 2 of them that have kind of had some success. I think Cam Newton is probably the most successful run-first quarterback we've seen. But even Cam Newton can throw the ball. Like, if I had to pick one of them to just stand in the pocket and throw it, I would take Cam Newton far and away over I'd take Lamar Jackson. Also, Richie wants to know what our opinion about Cam Newton is. He's about, I'm not going to ruin it, but he's 10 to 12 spots ahead here. We actually, when it comes to Cam Newton, he's higher than some of these other guys. But our final thoughts on Lamar Jackson before we move on here, Drew. I still see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think he has some of the farthest distance to go out of any of these young guys that we're going to be talking about in this category. But especially now, when you're this age, you're probably not going to learn to throw the ball. It's probably too late for that. If you were going to learn to pass, it probably would have to be before this point in your career. It's very, very rare that we see a guy enter the NFL and say, wow, he got so much better at throwing than he was in college because the windows are tighter, everybody's faster, you're going up against some of the best athletes in the world. I just don't see him taking any kind of steps forward, and I think 3 or 4 years from now we'll be talking about Baltimore maybe moving on.
I see the struggle that you're talking about where he's not going to learn, and as far as Baltimore moving on, that's yet to be seen because this is the reason I say that is now we have an off season. We have a chance, John Harbaugh, to sit down with his offensive coordinator, his offensive coaches, and go, what kind of offense did we put around Lamar Jackson for a whole nother year? And I know that they didn't get a chance to create this offense first. It was kind of like a, oh man, Flacco's hurt, what do we do kind of scenario. So as much as I agree with you that you're not going to learn how to throw the ball, we also didn't see an offense built around him to throw the ball in his kind of talent level.
Well, I think we kind of saw it. I mean, they ran consistently. He was throwing the ball like 18, 19 times a game.
But we all know that running the ball in the NFL is great, but you're not winning a Super Bowl doing it. So you got to learn at some point in time how to throw this ball.
I don't know. Denver kind of did. They kind of became more of a running team when Peyton Manning basically couldn't throw anymore. We saw Carolina get to one. And I know they lost.
The Super Bowl they won, Peyton Manning was throwing the ball.
Well, no. The one that they won, he was not. That was the one where he was injured. They lost one to Seattle where he was throwing a little bit there. No, I got you. But we've seen Seattle, which was a historically running team, do it. I think you can do it. But you're right. There needs to be some threat of the pass. Otherwise, everyone's going to stack up
I still think when you give him
forward.
a chance to get an offense built around him, it's going to be changed a little bit different. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Lamar Jackson struggles throwing the ball. Let's not get that confused. But the thing is, look at what they were doing prior to that. Joe Flacco was airing the ball out, big giant bombs with the biggest arm as he has, accuracy. John Brown looked good. Crabtree looked good.
And this is the guy
Snead
we've been
looked
dogging
good,
for years, and everything was turning around. I agree.
And it was going great, and then all of a sudden he got hurt, and you had to put in Lamar Jackson, who doesn't have that arm. So it is a little bit of a different change. This year is going to be a little bit of a struggle. Even though we have him on the D list, I think he has actually a possibility to move up a little bit. I know you're a little bit more down on him than I am.
I'm very down on him, but I do believe he's got a little bit of upward trajectory. I think he could get better. We could see a better version of Lamar Jackson in the next couple of years than what we see right now. The question is, what's the ceiling? I don't know, Drew. Like what? That's my biggest question too. What is the ceiling here? Yeah. Let's move forward though and talk about Jameis Winston at 31. Again, still in the D category. He's probably not winning a Super Bowl. I think you could put him on the Chiefs right now, and they probably still don't win. Or you could go put him on the Bears with a great defense. You're probably not going to win with a guy like Jameis Winston. Too many mistakes has been kind of the keynote to his entire career. He's a guy that cannot seem to stop shooting his team in the foot at those important times. Now, I get it. He puts up numbers, right? We've seen him put up 400-yard games like it's nothing. The problem is he'll throw 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions.
He was part of the number 2 passing offense last year.
Absolutely. Now, just Scott also said Peyton could outthrow Lamar Jackson right now. Maybe not at 42 or whatever Peyton Manning is. I don't know about that, but I get what you're saying.
But Brian's in agreement with us with Lamar Jackson. He says lack of arm strength and not accurate. It's going to be a struggle for him to find his stepping. I mean, that it's. I'm telling you right now. Let's give it one more year. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. To be honest with you, John Harbaugh never really had to deal with a quarterback that can't throw the ball. He's had Joe Flacco his whole entire career as head coach with the Ravens. Let's see what this offense can do. But luckily for him, he's got a great defense, or it was a great defense, and let's see what comes from it.
Back to Winston. This is your favorite quarterback here, right? Do you see any kind of developmental
my
traits?
favorite.
Exactly.
Totally.
Do you see any kind of developmental trait out of Jameis Winston? Is there some kind of light at the end of the tunnel for him? Because we do have him in the D category. We're not giving up on him like Eli.
Even though he had his best career last year, which he didn't play the whole 16 games because he can't keep himself out of trouble. No, I don't believe in him because he had 3 years prior to that, and all he could do is turn the ball over. And I'm not saying that fluke interception. What I'm saying is when the pressure's on him, he gets hit and he throws his arm back and he throws the ball straight in the air. Or he's running for a first down and he has one arm on the ball and he fumbles it when he gets hit. I mean, this guy consistently finds a time where it's crucial to hold on to the ball and releases it and gets a turnover. And for a quarterback to... Sometimes quarterbacks just don't know how to not turn the ball over.
Right.
And I really honestly think Winston is one of them.
Absolutely. And Richie kind of agrees with you. He says the problem with Winston is consistency. And you're absolutely right, Richie, because there will be times where Jameis Winston looks pretty good, right? He'll go out and throw for 300 to 400 yards, and he'll throw a couple touchdowns. But then the next week, he's back to throwing 3 picks, and you're down in the 200 yards because for whatever reason, you've been game planned, or he's just not feeling it that day. Jameis Winston, again, he's Jekyll and Hyde. He's a guy that will put up some good games, and when you see those good games, you want to believe in him. That's why we have him in the D category. But those good games are too few and far between, right, Drew? I mean, we're talking about maybe 4 games a season. He'll go and look like an almost an elite quarterback,
Right.
And then the other 12, he'll look somewhere in the middle to absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And Brian goes back into Jackson saying that Jackson will be an underneath route and screens. No doubt about it. He's going to be an RPO quarterback 100%. It's going to be a play action kind of scenario always. I highly doubt they're going to put 5 wide receivers in him and shotgun and moving forward.
The other problem with that, though, just really quick going back to Brian's point, is when that's all you do, defenses will cheat up, and when you make mistakes on those kind of plays, your underneath routes and your screens and everything, that's how you give up 6 points to the defense. I think by week 3, 4, 5, if the Ravens don't at least test the ball down the field a little bit, we're going to see some defenses that have scored some points against them. So I don't think it's something you can only do. I understand the RPO is very effective. I understand that you can have some kind of effectiveness with the short passing game, but once in a while you need to take shots and have that deep threat ability to try to push some of these secondary players back. Otherwise, like I said, you give up pick sixes. You wind up with fumbles because the guys are getting hit too quick. I really do believe they're going to have to do some creative stuff in Baltimore to have some offense.
Absolutely. Let's go back to Winston. Austin says, if he does not succeed under Bruce this year, I bet Tampa goes in a different direction next year. No doubt, man. There's no doubt about it. They picked up his 5th-year option. That's going to be the highest paid he's ever been in his contract in the NFL. You're talking anywhere for a starting NFL quarterback around $20 million plus now.
It's 20 and change. Yeah, I just looked at it the other day. Him and Marcus Mariota will be making 20 and change with this salary cap.
So there's no doubt about it that if he doesn't work out, he's moving on. And to be honest with you, and I said this in many shows prior to this, we're not just talking about a good season. We're not just talking about a great season. We're talking about an MVP caliber season. In my opinion, is the only reason the Bucs should keep Jameis Winston there.
And I've kind of disagreed in the past. I said if he has a very good season, especially with all the holes that the Buccaneers have in the rest of their roster, if he has a very good season, I think they will give him a prove-it deal. They'll give him a 1 or a 2 year extension, maybe even up to 3, where it's escapable towards the end. And it'll just be more prove-it time for Jameis Winston. But you're right, they're not going to go give him a 5-year contract. He's not going to go get Derek Carr money or Russell Wilson money. He's not going to get that major extension, no matter how good of a season he has. I don't even believe, even if he comes out and he's the MVP next year, that they'd sit there and ink him to a 5-year deal and say, hey, forget it, this is what we're going to say. Maybe if he's MVP.
But they almost have to at that scenario.
Moving forward, though, let's talk about our 30th ranked quarterback here, my guy, Marcus Mariota for the Titans. And this is pretty disappointing. I mean, when you look at guys that have gone 1 and 2 in successive drafts with him and Winston, it's pretty disappointing to see both these guys this far down on the list. I mean, usually you'll see a bust or two out of a draft, but it's almost like you can take that entire 15 draft and throw it out the window.
There's no doubt about it. This guy's struggled a lot, not only to stay on the field healthy, but also pocket presence. He has a struggle realizing when that pressure's on him, when to release the ball, but then he has glimmers of just like of great plays on his feet with throwing the ball. Either or, it seems like he seems to make it happen every now and then. The problem is, again, consistency. It's not there. And when you throw health in the issue, because Jameis Winston hasn't had health issues. His problem not being on the field is the fact he can't stay out of trouble. Mariota throws in the curveball of I can't stay healthy.
Absolutely.
So when you have inconsistency with health issues, it really makes you stay down there.
No, I totally agree with you. And the other big issue with Marcus Mariota, I think, is, like you said, he will show up at times, which makes this decision difficult for the Titans, where he'll have games like this year when he played the Eagles and he threw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he was really clutch in those moments where you really needed him to be there, throwing into double coverage, making things happen. But then the rest of the game, he doesn't do anything. His problem is he does not succeed in the mundane moments, so you never blow anybody out. You never get ahead. That's why you're winning these games 16-13, because he can't seem to get anything done in the first, second, third quarter until you sit there and put the pressure on him. The problem, the reason we kind of debated whether it was him or Winston is because, like you said, Winston, he's been more consistently healthy. He's had some of those flash games as well. I think the reason I have to put Mariota just a little bit ahead of him is even though he's had a better defense, even though he's had better receiving weapons at times than Jameis Winston has had, you still got to look at the team as a whole. Marcus has succeeded, but he's also got things done in clutch moments. We haven't really seen Winston have those clutch moments in the pros where, you're going to you need this win to get in the playoffs, or you're in the playoffs and you need something to happen. He's never had one of those moments that you can build a career on.
Right, and Richie is saying it just seems like Marcus is still playing at the college level.
Well, he was much better in college. He was much better at Oregon. I think part of it, too, is just the scheme they ran in Oregon with Chip Kelly was so weird and so unorthodox in college football. Nobody knew how to play against him, so it kind of skewed the way he was going to look in the pros. You had better success in college because nobody knew what to expect.
You're going to love Brian's comment. Brian says, health and lack of a dominant receiver hurts Mariota.
Well, I don't even think that's it. I think he has enough receiving weapons. When you look at Delaney Walker, when you look at Corey Davis and what you should be getting out of a guy that talented.
Yeah.
Again, you don't watch these games, I do. When you look at the guys they put around him, I don't think that's an excuse anymore. If you asked me that 2 years ago, I would probably agree with you. But at this point, they've invested heavily in the offense. It doesn't matter how many weapons they bring in. It's always, they never really seem to work out. Well, at some point, there's one constant there. It's Mariota's the one throwing him the ball, and he can't seem to get it done with any of these guys.
Well, let's be completely fair to Marcus Mariota here. He has not had a healthy DeMarcus Laney and a good Corey Davis playing at the exact same time multiple games.
And that is true. I mean, maybe next year when Corey Davis is the number 2 option, you have Delaney Walker out there soaking up all the attention. We see that explosive
And now
year.
you picked up a receiver, too, in the draft.
Absolutely. And Adam Humphries coming in. It's like they have done nothing but add weapons for this guy. So to me, that excuse has gotten... It's expired.
It's no longer
you have
an
weapons.
excuse.
Exactly. You have weapons. If you don't get it done here in year 5, you should have got it done in year 4. But if you don't get it done in year 5, I don't want to hear any more of this. The Titans don't have any weapons. It's the Titans don't have a guy to get those weapons the ball.
Richie says he has Walker, no excuse. He didn't have Walker all of last year, so there is one excuse for 1 year.
and that is true. And Walker is definitely the safety blanket. But You have other guys who can catch the ball. You have a third-round pick in Taywan Taylor, who, again, would be much better if he was playing for someone else. Corey Davis, I feel the same thing about him. The way I've watched these guys play and the separation they generate for the ball not to find them, if these guys were playing in Green Bay or Kansas City or out there in New England with good quarterbacks, these would be household names. They have the talent there. They just don't have the guy to deliver the ball.
I mean, Mariota has struggled to find the open receiver down the field.
Absolutely.
And in the NFL, there's no doubt
Absolutely.
about it.
He had about one good year throwing the ball deep to Rashard Matthews, of all people, who doesn't usually run deep routes. But except for year 2, he has not been able to complete much down the field as well. I totally agree with that.
All right.
Let's move forward. Let's talk about our next guy on the list. Still in the D category, we have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who, again, you talk about flashes in the pan. The guy looks amazing at times, and then other times you're like, how is this guy in the NFL? I can do better than this. He makes some of the worst interceptions I've ever seen, where a defender will be standing in the middle of the field, nobody's there, and he'll just throw it to him. And then other times, he sit there and throw 4 touchdowns, 440-some yards against good defenses in a place like Tampa Bay, and you're sitting there wondering, who is this guy? Like, there's no rhyme or reason. He just flips a coin. He's like, am I going to be good today?
Real quick, going back to Mariota, B says, I think Mariota will not be the quarterback halfway through the season. I am in complete agreement with that.
Bold prediction. I don't think he's going to start the season. I think he's going to get beat out in training camp.
Just about to say.
Well, I beat you to it. Sorry. No beer bet on that one.
No beer bet. Ryan Fitzpatrick. You're talking about a guy that the Buffalo Bills try to create a team around. You're talking about a team, the Jets, who try to build a team around this guy. This guy has everything you want. He looks good during preseason. He looks good during training camp. He seems to stay healthy. He has those flashes in the pan where he could throw 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Problem is the consistency. He has way too long of a career of not staying consistent. And it's okay not to throw 400 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. But it's not okay to throw 150 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions.
Right.
And that's what he seems to constantly be doing at least multiple times in a year.
Exactly. He has no consistency. The reason we put him on this list, even though this is the second Dolphin now we've featured on this list, is because he's expected to start the year, and we don't know how far he goes into the season. This guy could be the starter for Week 8. He'd come out on fire like he did with Tampa Bay last year, have 8 good games, and stay the starter. Or he could come out, look terrible, and then all of a sudden we're seeing Josh Rosen by Week 2 or 3 because there's all this pressure on the Dolphins to make a change. He's still got potential, right? I mean, if he could ever string together 16 of his best games, I mean, this team, he could potentially win a Super Bowl, right?
I mean,
maybe not in Miami, but
yeah. I mean, let's not forget him and Winston put up the second best passing offense in the league last year. If the
and
Bucs,
who was the better of the two?
If the Bucs remotely had a running game, let's not forget about this Bucs offense. The number 2 receiver was Winston. The number 3 rusher was Winston. The number 3 rushing
threat
in total yardage was Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Absolutely. I mean, he was all Peyton Barber or bust, and even
And
Peyton Barber. You don't look
yards.
at Peyton Barber and say, "Yeah, man, we're good at running back. We don't need any more of those." They drafted Ronald Jones highly. Didn't really seem to pan out. They didn't want him on the field. The guy couldn't find a hole. Apparently, he's Trent Richardson 2.0. So, I agree with you. He didn't have a lot of weapons, but at least in the running game, he had a lot of weapons in wide receiver. But now Tampa Bay's only got thinner at them, so I don't know.
And then you sit there and ask me who was the better quarterback out of Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston, and I am agreeing with you. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a better quarterback at this point in time than Jameis Winston. If I had to pick between the two, I'd be starting Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, you'd hold your breath and plug your nose and go take Ryan Fitzpatrick. All right, one more comment really quick before we move on. Bees says Fitz is the most inconsistent quarterback of all time. No one else has ever done inconsistency better. And I totally agree. Again, you don't know what you're going to get. You're almost just spinning a roulette wheel, and it just depends on which number you land on with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But why don't we move on? Why don't we talk about our next guy, Case Keenum here. A guy that, again, Drew, 2 years ago, I was all in on the Case Keenum freight train. I was like, I think he can be a good quarterback in the NFL. And then Denver happened, and all of a sudden, I'm a little bit more out on that now. I still believe this guy, if the perfect scenario for him, if you wind up on a team like the Vikings that have great receivers, have a great running back, have a great defense, we can still see him shine and look good at times. Do I think he's winning a Super Bowl? No, not even with that squad. I mean, there's a reason that the Philadelphia Eagles dominated them in that NFC Championship game. Right. I think this guy, again, is just another bridge, but a bridge that the Redskins are lucky to have.
Yeah, not that I don't think Case Keenum is a good guy and a decent quarterback at times. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. This isn't a guy that you grab onto your team, and I said it last year when the Broncos picked him up. This was a terrible move. This is not a guy that you want starting your franchise. The only reason you'd have that happen is because someone got hurt. And I think it was proven. As great as Minnesota was 2 years ago when he had that, he was also throwing to probably the best duo of receivers and one of the best tight ends in the NFL when he did it. And that defense was completely on fire. It was had everything going. Emerson Griffin did not have his mental breakdown yet. I mean, this team looked dominant all the way through. It was kind of like a Trent Dilfer kind of scenario, where it's just like, don't turn the ball over, and we can win the Super Bowl, and that seemed to not happen. That being said, him and the Redskins, and what the Redskins have on offense, he's going to struggle.
Absolutely.
He doesn't have those weapons anymore. He actually had more weapons in Denver than he does in the Redskins, and I don't see him doing well at all.
The only plus I'll say is he's going to have a better running game than he had in Denver, even though Phillip Lindsay was good at times, and he's going to have a better offensive line as long as some of those guys can stay healthy for the Redskins. So maybe Case Keenum can kind of revitalize his career. But regardless of who's under center, whether they go with the rookie Dwayne Haskins early or not, I don't think Case Keenum or I don't think any of them are going to have a lot of success because they don't have the weapons to kind of complete these passes to. Now, Richie also says Keenum is a solid backup at most. He's better than a solid backup. He's better than every backup quarterback in the NFL. The problem is he's probably not much better than a lot of these other starters, right? He's somewhere in the middle of that starting quarterback to backup range.
Well, Austin's agreed. He said the Vikings' talent made him look better than he actually is. A solid backup, though. I agree. I think he's just a backup.
I think there are a lot of teams that would like to have him as a backup quarterback.
I think he could play almost till he's 40 years old as long as he stays healthy, but he'll never start again. Realistically, unless he's...
I bet you he starts this year. I bet you they probably don't go Dwayne Haskins from day one. I wouldn't. If my receivers look like that...
What I'm saying is he shouldn't start. How about that?
Okay, fair enough. Then again, not every team can be the Redskins. Let's move forward and talk about the last guy in our D category here, Alex Smith. The former Kansas City Chief, how far he's fallen since the 17 season where he absolutely lit up the board, and we were talking about him being an MVP candidate and everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, is some of that attributed to the Washington Redskins not having any receivers? I mean, Josh Doctson, their leading receiver, has yet to have a 100-yard receiving game. So there's no one to throw to.
No, you're 100% right, but let's not forget that this Redskins team was 6-2 before he got hurt. Even though he wasn't putting up amazing numbers, which he's really has not done consistently. But this is a guy that doesn't turn the ball over. This is a guy that plays smart football. So he relies on a great defense, a good run game around him, which the Redskins gave him. Problem is now he's injured. Mm-hmm. Question is how much is left. I mean, this was a significant injury. The break was absolutely terrible. There was an infection. They took a chunk out of his leg. More than likely, he's not playing at all this year. So the question is when he comes back at 35, 34, whatever age he is when he comes back, how much does he have left in the tank? So when you talk about a team that has everything going for him, worst case scenario, Bees, you'll love this. Let's just say Trubisky gets hurt. He's done for a year. Would you pick up someone like Alex Smith? Do you think Alex Smith in a year from now could help the Bears win a Super Bowl? I think there's a good possibility with a great defense and an okay offense around Alex Smith that you're a playoff contender.
I think you can get to the playoffs. Do I think you can win the Super Bowl? I don't.
I think this is what...
Even beyond the injury. Like we saw, like you said, you went 6-2 with the Redskins.
This is our last guy on the D list.
Right.
So he's right there on that cusp of C where it's just like, if he could, if
he gets everything around.
Exactly.
And I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, he's on that kind of cusp, but there's a reason we put him in the D category instead of the C. You said, like you just said, the Redskins went 6-2 with him as a starter, but did they do it because Alex Smith was throwing for 178 yards a game?
No, he wouldn't turn the ball over.
No, he wasn't turning the ball over, and they were running the ball really well, and they were playing really good defense. Do I think if they did that around him, they could win a Super Bowl? It would be very, very difficult. Maybe if you had the best running game in NFL history and the best defense in NFL history, that could power you to a Super Bowl with Alex Smith just not making mistakes.
A team like the Bears could do it.
I don't even know if the Bears could do it anymore. With Jordan Howard gone, I'm not sure they have a strong enough running back that they could just sit there and say, you take it up the middle and we'll sit there and pound for 3.5 yards and win a Super Bowl.
I fully believe in David Montgomery, their young rookie running back that they picked up, and then they have Tree Cohen. I think that team's going to be pretty decent. But Scott is saying that the Redskins would have made some noise if Alex Smith would have stayed healthy.
I think they would have made the playoffs, and that's kind of what we had predicted, right? We were saying this is a really talented roster outside of pass catchers.
Right.
I think, yeah, if you get a guy that can throw for that 178 yards instead of the 78 that Josh Johnson wound up averaging, or 93 or whatever it was.
Right.
If you had Alex Smith play, they probably would have made the playoffs. I don't really know if they would have beat one of these complete teams in the playoffs like the Eagles or the Bears or or the
well,
Saints. I just don't see them matching up with them as good as they were.
So the thing is about this team and what they were last year is they had one of the best defenses, and what they did is they were stingy. You weren't going to shut anybody out, but you weren't going to score them a lot of points against teams that had great offenses. So when you sat there and you brought in someone like Alex Smith, who isn't going to turn the ball over, but has that flash in the pan kind of play, I saw it many a times as a Chiefs fan, where it's like this play is over, and he seemed to make it happen, and he made it happen with a lot of mediocre receivers around him. Until Tyreek Hill, until Kelsey came around, the Chiefs didn't really have a dominant receiving core. You might say Dwayne Bowe, but I was never extremely impressed with that guy.
I think Dwayne Bowe was a pretty good receiver. I think he was just kind of like I complain about Mariota, not really maximizing his talent. I think Alex Smith didn't do a good job of maximizing his talent. So, yeah, I think there's a reason this guy caps off our D category. Let's move on, though, Drew. Let's talk about the C category. With these guys, if you put everything around them, if you give them a good defense, if you give them a good offensive line to protect them, some good receivers, and a good running back as well, if you do almost everything under the sun and create a good team, they can win a Super Bowl.
Before you go into our C category, Tony has a question. He said, hey, did Gerald McCoy really have to leave his Bucks?
Unless it happened just recently, I haven't heard anything about it. I heard he's still under contract for $13 or $14 million a year, and everyone's saying he needs to move on. So unless that news just came out, I haven't heard yet.
Yeah, they released him just here shortly. Well, I mean, let's be...
Dude, you're not going anywhere. This is the time to purge a little bit of salary, especially when you're challenged like the Bucks are with cap space. You got to do it because they got to sign some rookies.
There's no doubt about it. He's a leader on that offense or defense. He was a leader in that locker room. He was definitely a vocal leader, but he hasn't really stayed healthy. He really hasn't been what he was prior to a couple years ago. And you're right. When you talk about a team that's literally in the whole rebuilding process, maybe right now is not the best option for McCoy.
Especially because he's 31. If the kid was 26, we'd be in a different spot because you can sit there and say, look, 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to be pretty good. Or we should expect to be pretty good from now. Right now, at 31, by the time you're good, he's not going to be. It's okay to move on from him at this point. Yeah, this season is going to be rough, right?
And
no Pierre-Paul, now no Gerald McCoy. It's going to look ugly on that front seven for Tampa. But this is a season it's okay. Especially if Jameis Winston bombs out, you're going to want to have a bad season.
Thank you, Brian, for letting us know. But I read it as well. It was just kind of one of those things where we were talking about quarterbacks, so we didn't get into a lot of NFL news. I just honestly think this is a whole new era. It's a whole new era for Tampa Bay Bucks. And as much as McCoy did great for them when he was early on in his career, what has he got left in the tank? The guy can't stay healthy. The guy cannot stay healthy.
And more than that, they can't seem to put any good players around him. I know Pierre-Paul had 12.5 sacks last year.
You have a young guy in Vita Vea. If you fully believe in your first round draft pick last year who got hurt and then played a majority of the season, this is a guy's opportunity to sit there and hey, it's your time to prove it. You no longer have McCoy there. It's your turn. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Listen, guys, the Bucks aren't winning no Super Bowl this year. I mean, I hate to be that way against you Bucks fans, but you're not.
No.
So why don't you give all your young players a good, decent chance to do it? A 31-year-old defensive tackle doesn't help your young guys develop.
More than that, they were talking about not having enough money to sign all their draft picks. So what's the easiest way to free up that cap space? Cut the $13 million man, recoup as much as that is not guaranteed, and move on. Like you said, 31 years old, he's not going to be good by the time that you need him to be. It's okay to move on from a guy like that at this point. It stinks. It's always tough seeing a guy that's been with your franchise for that long leave, but yeah, I mean, Gerald McCoy, it's time to move on.
Brian said someone will sign him. I completely agree with that. And Scott says Colt McCoy has a perfect name for his next job, a Texas high school gym teacher.
Oh,
Thanks,
come on.
Scott.
He'll be a quarterback coach for some high school, right? Someone will pick up Colt McCoy. But he's still a Redskin. Like, they haven't moved on from Colt McCoy, even though he broke his leg. I even heard that big news flash from a couple days ago saying he'll be ready for the beginning of the 2019 season. Fantastic. So
if they don't like...
If Dwayne Haskins comes down with some kind of, like, mysterious illness from the Amazon or something...
If they don't believe in in where he is right now, Haskins, or where he is in 8 games in the season, McCoy will start.
Yeah, okay.
I said if.
All right, I'll buy it. I don't know
If
that anyone has
Haskins'
that
development
patience.
isn't there where they want it to be, Colt McCoy might start.
Drew, we got to move on. Are you ready to go back to quarterbacks?
We need to.
Let's talk about Joe Flacco leading the way at the bottom end of our C category. If you put everything around Joe Flacco, he can win you a Super Bowl.
Yep.
And we've seen him do it, right?
Yep.
He had an all-time defense in Baltimore. He had Ray Rice, who was still playing really well back then. He had a great offensive line. Maybe not so much at the wide receiver, but he had as close to a complete team as anyone is going to put together. and they won a Super Bowl. Do you still think he has that potential?
It would literally have to be another one of those top 10 all-time defenses ever in the
Right.
NFL for Joe Flacco to
So
win
Denver
another
right
season.
now, right?
No. Even though they want to be, and Vic Fangio will make this defense better than it was, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because it was a good defense, and he did all the play calling in the Chicago Bears. I'm not giving all the credit to him, but he's a huge reason why Chicago Bears defense was so great.
Well, Tony's all in on Joe Flacco. He says he can do it. I think he can too. Do I think it happens in Denver? Probably not, but I do believe they're probably closer to being an elite defense than they are to being mediocre. I think, again, you've got guys like Chris Harris on there who's an absolutely fantastic cornerback. I think the pass rush is pretty much solved when you look at what they've done in the draft this year as well. I think defensively, especially up front, the Broncos are going to be pretty good. If they can put anything together, like that no-fly zone secondary they had from a few years ago, we're going to be talking about them being a great defense. Offensively, again, they're still trying to find themselves and have been for a long time. I don't really see them putting it together. They don't have the wide receiving muscle I think it's going to take to be a good team and really help Joe Flacco out. I look at this, it's always tough bringing a young tight end on. I know they drafted the Iowa tight end, Noah Fant. It's always tough bringing a first-year tight end on.
And I love that draft pick.
2 or 3 years from now, I think he'd be pretty good. But this year specifically, do I think he's going to come out and be the next Evan Ingram?
Oh, and they still have Lamar.
It's going to be tough.
They still have Von Miller, Lamar.
And they do. They absolutely have Von Miller. They have Bradley Chubb, who's just as, maybe not just as good, but he's a great talent on the other side playing across from. They are great in the front seven. They've got Evan Wolf still. They are fantastic up front.
So, Tony, I have a question for you. Are you a Broncos fan or are you a Joe Flacco fan? Just because you seem so passionate about it that he can win another Super Bowl. I just had a question. I just need to know what it is. Not that it matters, but when I look at this Broncos defense and they have all the pieces where you want it to be and they have a defensive-minded coach, there's no doubt at all that this defense could be a top 10 defense, that this defense could bring this team into a playoffs almost alone with just talent alone. But when you look at that offensive side of the ball, does Joe Flacco change everything on that offense? Because you guys struggled. The Broncos absolutely struggled with Case Keenum. And they had more pass options with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders not hurt. I mean, and they had a young running game too. And their offense couldn't click properly. So when you sit there and you say he can win a Super Bowl, is he winning a Super Bowl with the Broncos? Or is he winning a Super Bowl with the 2000 or was it 2012 or whatever it was, Ravens? I mean,
I think it was 11, but yeah,
I mean,
in that ballpark.
I mean, that's just a question. I just wanted to know, Tony.
Absolutely. Also, Richie says to be a successful and positive leader is a must. I think they are getting kind of a leader in Joe Flacco. Hopefully, I know we've seen some of the stuff where he's coming out there saying it's not my job to teach the rookie and everything. I think that's okay. It's a little bit of pushback. It's kind of this mentality of, look, I'm still the starter. You're not just going to wash me away because you spent a second round pick on a quarterback. I think this is totally fine for Joe Flacco. I think, again, they've got a guy who's won a Super Bowl. He knows what he's doing. To come in and talk with guys like Von Miller, who have also won a Super Bowl, and been to 2. I think the Broncos bringing on Joe Flacco is an incremental increase, but do I necessarily see them winning a Super Bowl right away? No. Maybe if they get better next year, and we talk about Flacco sticking around and then bringing in a bunch of receivers, maybe next year they can be a contender, but for right now, you got the Chargers, you got the Chiefs who are much better. Oakland is probably going to be improved over last year. This is a tough sell for me to sit there and say Denver's going to be anything more than a 6 or 7 win team.
All right, just go back. Tony said he's from Jacksonville. He's a 7th season ticket holder. He wants to know what his quarterback will be like. Dude, we'll get to him.
Well, he's higher up. Yeah, we will talk about him tonight. I wanted to get through all of this tonight, Drew, but I should have known better. I should have known better. It's not going to happen.
He also said Denver will be a force, but then Scott kind of knocks you down, man, and he's right. He said they cannot win a shootout with Kansas City or the Chargers.
So you have to rough them up. That's what you have to do. You have to get better on the defense, and I think that's kind of been where a lot of their focus has been, where we want to get as good on defense as we can because we know these other teams are going to be good at offense. That's why they brought in a guy like Flacco who hopefully won't make any turnovers or a ton of mistakes. They're going to lean on the run game, try to shorten these games, and try to beat them with the defense. Is it going to work? No, but I understand what they're trying to do.
Right.
All right, Drew, let's move on. Let's talk about our next guy, Josh Allen, our 25th best quarterback in the NFL here. Is that a little harsh for a rookie that showed some flash, showed some positivity in year 1 with Buffalo?
No, I think it's the right rating for or ranking for him. You know, this year is going to be a little bit different. They brought a lot of talent around this guy. Is it top tier talent? No, but these are good NFL players. These are good players like John Brown and Cole Beasley, people that can make a quarterback have a little bit of a security blanket. Is he going to have a number one receiver? I don't know. There's yet to be seen. Is his offensive line going to be better? Well, we hope so because they revamped the whole entire offensive line and drafted it. They have 7 new offensive linemen. If they can't figure out this offensive line, they're going to struggle a little bit.
Well, that's the thing. Are any of them any good except for Mitch Morris? I mean, who again missed a lot of year due to injury last year. Are any of these guys any good?
Yeah.
Are any of these guys going to fit what they want to do? Are any of these guys going to perform to a starting level? They brought in a lot of offensive linemen, but none of them that you really look at and say, yeah, he's going to be good. Like, I reasonably expect him to be good. There's a lot of what ifs. They're kind of throwing a lot of darts at the board and hoping a few of them stick. Drew, I look at this, and again, they tried to add to this team, but they have not done it in any kind of impactful way or any kind of sure. It's not a sure thing, is what I want to go out and say.
Right.
I look at what Buffalo has done. Same thing with Cole Beasley. Same thing with John Brown. Yeah, we've seen those guys have a little bit of success, but are they the kind of guys that have success everywhere? I don't know. I haven't seen that out of these Buffalo guys. I think Buffalo, again, has a lot of question marks here. Yeah, they've tried to improve, but there's a very good chance we talk about them being just as bad or worse at some of these positions than they were last year.
Austin says he needs to work on accuracy with all the arm strength in the world. It doesn't matter if you can't hit your target.
Absolutely, and that's why he's lower than some of these other guys on this list, because just like some of these rookie quarterbacks we'll be talking about here coming up, they've shown that even when things are bad, even when I don't have weapons, I can be accurate at times. I can make some throws that you want to see out of a young guy.
See you, Tony. Thanks.
Absolutely, man. Good to see you. That's why we saw a guy like Josh Allen drop a little bit farther. Even though he won some games with his legs, you need to throw the ball as a pro, and he just didn't get it done in the passing department. There were some games he was winning where he was throwing 80 or 90 yards, and yeah, you can blame the weapons, but a lot of some of the blame falls on the quarterback's shoulders too. If you deliver the ball, they're going to be open and they're going to be there to catch it too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Scott goes, quick passes to Beasley will help him out. This is going to go right back to my scenario with Lamar Jackson. And yeah, they started him, Josh Allen out as the starting quarterback this last year, but now he's got another year behind him. And let's be honest, his receiving corps last year was not impressive at all. That's the reason why they let Kelvin Benjamin go throughout the year. They're going to bring in guys, like I said, that aren't going to tear up the world, but they're pros. They're guys that are going to come in, they're going to practice. They're going to play 16 games for you. They're going to try to stay healthy and be healthy for your quarterback to learn and develop around him. Does Josh Allen's accuracy surprise anybody? No, that was the huge question mark around him coming out of college, going into the draft, is what does his accuracy leave on the table? But guess what? He didn't really necessarily turn the ball over an extreme amount of times. When that guy didn't see anything open, he moved with his legs. And guess what? That guy can move and did a lot of damage
especially
with his
for
legs.
his size. He moves very, very well. Also, Brian says Josh Allen's best game was against Minnesota. He has potential, and we kind of agree with you, Brian. That's why we have him in our C category, where this guy, if you put everything around him right now, could probably win a Super Bowl. Like I said, if you put Kansas City's offense and Chicago's defense out there with him, this guy could lead a team to a Super Bowl right now. Do we see him getting better in the future? Probably a little bit, but again, the hardest thing to build is accuracy as a pro quarterback. Do I see him making some overnight switch to being, Aaron Rodgers and being incredibly accurate? Probably not. He has more building to do than a lot of these other guys in this list, which is why he fell all the way to 25 for us.
Well, let's go and move on to 24. And this was a little bit surprising to me. We had Andy Dalton at 24. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's literally started almost every game in his career until these last couple of years. We got a little banged up, but you're talking about that he's very consistent. He's always set himself around kind of the average to mediocre quarterback levels, but never really got past that first playoff win. Always kept getting there, but couldn't do any more. Now he's got a whole new coach set up. I mean, this is all different now in Cincinnati. Does this not help him?
I think Marvin Lewis out of the building probably helps this team. Yes, absolutely. I think they get better, even regardless of how good their new coach is. I think when you look at the Bengals, they needed a change. They were way too complacent, and they let the roster fall apart. That being said, man, he's got no defense right now. So I'm not going to sit there and, if they don't have success this year, point the finger and say, well, now it's time to get rid of Andy Dalton. Let's face it, the Bengals are like teams like Tampa Bay, where we're looking at this roster and we're like, they are not going to compete. That being said, Andy Dalton, despite that roster being in shambles last season, made a lot of things happen with guys like Tyler Boyd. A.J. Green, when he was healthy, was really good with Andy Dalton, even though he always has been. It was nice to see other guys get involved in the offense. Yeah. You put a running back like Joe Mixon with Andy Dalton, he was looking like an all-pro quarterback, basically, Drew, until he got hurt. I mean, the guy was absolutely lighting it up. They were losing games, but they were scoring 30 and 40 points with this offense with Andy Dalton. Does that mean it's always going to be like that? No, but I do believe if you put the best kind of roster around Andy Dalton, he potentially could be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Dude, There's still a lot of gap between him and some of the guys above him, but he's still a guy that could eventually win a Super Bowl.
Scott says, when does Dalton get the label of game manager?
Is that even fair? I mean, the guy probably would have thrown 4,000 yards if he didn't get hurt last year. So would you call a game manager a guy who throws 4,000 yards?
I watched the game manager of the NFL play for my Kansas City Chiefs for the last 5 years in Alex Smith, and there's a huge difference between Andy Dalton and Alex Smith. I mean, Andy Dalton, as much as he definitely favors throwing the ball to A.J. Green, the thing is, it makes him different than a game manager, is he's willing to put the ball in the air for 40, 50 yards in the air instead of doing those dink and dunks to his running backs.
And I think part of it could be attributed to the organization. They haven't done enough to keep Andy Dalton with enough talent around him. And
I was just about to say, but as much as we all want to knock Andy Dalton, and I don't mean to interrupt you, it's what have they done to put stuff around him to make him better than a wild card playoff team?
And they did have a good defense when they went to the playoffs. Yes, Andy Dalton choked when he was younger, but the opportunities have been few and far between. This hasn't been like teams like the Ravens who are consistently good.
Yeah.
They had a good run there when he was a younger quarterback where they had a good defense. They had guys like Mohamed Sanu and A.J. Green both in their prime playing well for Cincinnati. I think they also had Marvin Jones in that team. But, okay, so he choked 1 year, right? That can happen.
Yeah.
And then what happened? The team fell apart, and now it's like everyone wants to label Andy Dalton as a bad quarterback because there's no one around him. He's making it happen with guys like Tyler Boyd and Tyler Kroft and all these other guys that, let's face it, probably are not starting caliber guys. And year in and year out, he's at least putting up halfway decent numbers with them. This year, he looked really good. I think Andy Dalton just needs to be in a better organization to succeed, and the problem is he's probably not going to get that chance.
Yeah. Owen, I'm glad your pizza got there, man. We're in Nashville if you want to deliver us some. I know you're not delivering pizzas, but we'll take some if you're willing to
Drew,
send them.
Give your address out over the internet. Good idea.
Ready? It's
pen and paper.
Austin
ready?
said the Bengals had one of the most quiet off-season I'm thinking he's saying one of the best, most quiet off-seasons in free agency and draft-wise.
No, he's saying worse. He's saying they were very quiet in the free agency period, and then he wasn't saying they were doing a good job with the draft.
Definitely not going to help Andy Dalton out.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think on one hand, they could have done more, but on the other hand, would you go sign with Cincinnati right now?
No.
If you're a free agent, unless they're offering me, 20 or 30% more than somewhere else I could go, I would go play for almost anywhere else because I know that organization struggles. I know that organization historically has not been good. They've washed out guys that have talent. And look, you look at the Bengals. What if I'm an NFL player and I want to win remotely and it's not about the money for me? Why am I going to go sign in Cincinnati when that's a tough division and you're like the bottom of that group?
Right.
So I understand the free agency at least. They could have done better in the draft.
All right, moving on at number 23. And this was a little bit quite surprising. Maybe this is a little bit of a Titan hope for you, and that's Ryan Tannehill at number 23.
Well, last year I had him a lot lower.
Does moving teams from Miami Dolphins, who there's no doubt about they're struggling, to a team like the Titans, who have definitely focused on making their offense better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a huge upgrade for him. Kind of like Andy Dalton hasn't had a lot of opportunities or many years where the team has been good enough in Cincinnati. You can say the exact same thing about Ryan Tannehill. I mean, last year, Drew, we picked him to win 2 games. They won 7. I think 5 of them we said beforehand were Ryan Tannehill's. Look, I think this year especially has kind of shaped my opinion of him. Yes, he gets hurt a lot, but when he's out there, he's a guy that keeps this Dolphins team competitive when the rest of the roster kind of suggests that they shouldn't be. So I look at Tannehill and I say, okay, he's going to the Titans that have had, for the past couple of years, a very, very good defense. They've added more weapons around him. If he's the starting quarterback for him, this team could win a Super Bowl. And at the very least, this needs to be a playoff contender because you've got a top 5 defense already. You've got an offensive line that, yeah, it wasn't the best last year, but is not removed, has a lot of talent on it, is not too many years removed from being very, very good as well. You've got all these weapons under the sun. You have good running backs in Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis as well, who's had some success. Everything else is there. You just need a halfway decent quarterback. Do I think you're going to see an improvement with Ryan Tannehill coming in? I would much rather gamble on him than Marcus Mariota.
I am actually a huge believer in Ryan Tannehill. I think the worst thing that happened to him was the fact that he was drafted by Miami. I think that there was nothing down there that really, and a quarterback at his caliber of skill was going to change anything down there. If let's just say if like a Drew Brees or Tom Brady went down to Miami, we're talking something different. But we're talking about Ryan Tannehill, a former receiver, it turned into a quarterback, definitely talented, definitely a physical guy. He made the team better than what it really was. And I think that's a lot's going to show this year now that he's gone, because that's a team that me and you both said maybe 2
No
games
chance.
at max.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he gave them, 7 wins. I know he didn't win all those games. Brock Osweiler came in there and won a few, but this team is better with him out there. So you nailed it on the dot. When you put everything around him, something like the Titans, who hands down are a better team than Miami, even though they lost to Miami last year in some fluke game.
Well, that was down to reffing, but I won't get into that.
But this is an opportunity for Ryan Tannehill, when he gets a chance to start, to prove he's a better quarterback.
Number 22, Drew, Sam Darnold. Again, when you look at rookie quarterbacks, when you look at guys who have not had the ideal roster around them, you want to see flashes and plays where they make things happen. I think Sam Darnold, more than any other rookie in this class, even Baker Mayfield, who had a lot more weapons around him, has made something out of nothing, has made things happen with guys who probably should not be competitive, and has shown the upward potential you want to see out of a young quarterback. That's why we have him ahead of guys like Josh Allen and Josh Rosen and Lamar Jackson as well. That's the reason why we have him at number 22, because even though we agree this year is probably going to be a wash for the Jets, they didn't address receiver enough for him to be an elite quarterback. We do believe that going forward, if they could eventually put some receivers here around him, this kid could actually be pretty good.
Jeremy, I'm glad you could join us, man. Make sure you're paying attention to the road if you're on the road. Sam Darnold's just one of those players where it's like you got to give him time. There's a reason why a lot of experts, talent people that sit there and said, this is your best quarterback out of last year's draft. He didn't go number 1. I didn't think he was worth a number 1 pick. I'm a Baker Mayfield guy. But this guy definitely has a lot of proving to do this next season with Le'Veon Bell around him.
Right, and Owen also says Osweiler is a bum. We're not arguing that, but we do have to say he did win a game or 2 in Miami, so at least he got that done. As for Sam Darnold, yes, he has upward potential. He has what you want to see out of a young guy, which is those flash plays where you're like, man, that was a good play, or he was under pressure there and he made a good decision. We saw a lot more out of that, especially on a team that didn't deserve to be giving him those opportunities. Yeah. That's why we have him at number 22. If you could put this guy on Kansas City instead of Patrick Mahomes, we might be talking about this being the next young star, kind of Jared Goff-esque, where all it took was a change of regime, and all of a sudden you went from a bad quarterback or a guy who wasn't making a lot of things happen to pretty good, right?
If Unwa and Anderson and Crowder can all stay healthy, we're going to see what Sam Darnold's about. None of those guys, in my opinion, are a number 1 receiver.
I'm not phoning it in, even if those guys stay healthy, because I'm looking at all those guys. I'm like, Quincy Enunwa is like a 3rd receiver. Robbie Anderson's like an afterthought that can run down the field a little bit. And was it Jameson Crowder, the other one? Okay, Jameson Crowder's okay. I like Jameson Crowder.
Jeremy, we're going 32 to 1. No, he needs all 3 of these receivers to stay healthy, because these are the receivers he's learning to have chemistry with in this offseason.
And you're right, they do need them healthy. They're better with those guys in the field. But if let's say he struggles again this year, I'm not going to be like, dude, you had Quincy Enunwa.
No.
Everything's fine.
That's not what I meant about it. I just meant the fact that they need to stay healthy for this year for him, because that's who he's learning his chemistry with.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. Let's move on. Let's talk about 21, Dak Prescott. Again, a guy that's kind of in the middle, which we're talking about halfway through the NFL here, or very close to it when you talk about 34 quarterbacks that we're going to be talking about. I think Dak Prescott's another guy that has a little bit of upward potential. We saw a little bit of that this year, right? They brought in Amari Cooper, and he looks like a new quarterback. Does that make him a $30 million man? Of course it doesn't. Are the Cowboys probably going to pay him that? Of course they probably are.
He will be the highest paid quarterback when they pay him.
But the problem here is he going to be one of these other guys, or can he eventually develop into one of these guys to be worth that money? And I just don't think so. I don't think you can take him and put him on a team like New England last year, where the talent wasn't necessarily there, and they still get the job done.
And to be honest, that's not a knock on him. That's not sitting there saying that he's not... Well, hold on. Let me rephrase that. He is not worth being the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He's not a Russell Wilson. He's not an Aaron Rodgers. He's not a Drew Brees, a Tom Brady, a Patrick Mahomes. He's not there. But he can possibly be in that cusp of that next guy where it's like, when do we give Dak that? Because everything that's around him, the way that the Dallas Cowboys are giving him that talent, he's got one of the best offensive lines. We saw some regression. One of the best offensive lines.
We saw some regression last year.
Arguably the best running back in the NFL. He's got a number 1 receiver.
If he stops hitting people, I just heard he got arrested for pushing another guy down.
He'll be fine.
I hope so.
And he's got...
I think Goodell's out for blood.
He's got a number 1 receiver, and they're trying to get Allen Hurns there and try to get him... Well, he's already been there, but try to get him figured out. And you also have the tight end that just came back,
Jason Witten.
Jason Witten. I mean, this is a season where it's like, dude, if you don't put up 40-plus touchdowns and 4,000 yards throwing the ball, maybe you should not be your quarterback.
First off, it's not going to happen. Dallas doesn't throw enough for that to happen. I understand that. And I get what you're saying. I wouldn't want to pay him either. But Dallas has a tough decision here because he's not a bad quarterback.
I don't think Zeke will miss any games, man.
I think he'll miss a couple. I think probably Roger Goodell is going to sit there and say, you have a history of it. I'm going to suspend you because I don't want to look soft on guys who are out there doing stuff.
Well, let's not forget he got handcuffed but not arrested.
And I agree. I'm not saying he should. I'm saying, what do I think will probably happen? I think Goodell's probably going to go after him. I don't know how many. I'm going to say 4 because, again, it's not as bad as some of the other stuff. I hope not, but we'll see. As for Dak Prescott, my final thought on him is, look, regardless of the money, he's kind of shown that if you put some guys around him, they can be a playoff team. He's had a great defense. They brought in Amari Cooper. Like you said, now they have Jason Witten as well. If they can stay healthy and they can stay consistent, what we saw in the back 8 games after they traded for Amari Cooper was good enough to potentially win a Super Bowl if the defense is playing at a really high level. So that's why he's still in our C category. Everything's got to be perfect, but the Cowboys are getting pretty close to perfect. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 more receiving threats, but beyond that, I think they're in a pretty good spot right now.
Guys, we're going to try and move on real quick on your comments. If we ignore them, it's not because we don't want to. It's just because time is getting tight. But Thomas says, bring back Josh Gordon. I tell you
He'll be
right,
back.
I'll tell you right now, some team will take advantage on him. Austin says, the talent around Dak makes him look better than he is. He's good, but not amazing. I think that's exactly why we have him where we have him on this list.
Exactly.
And so when you look at the next quarterback on this list, number 20, Cam Newton. We're talking about a team that has taken his team to a Super Bowl. We're talking about an MVP of the NFL. But why is he so low on our list?
Because it was a fluke. And it's not to say that he doesn't maybe have that in him again. Maybe you have one more fluke year in there. But if you look at the rest of his production, his completion percentages, everything else, they dropped significantly from that MVP year. The consistency is not there when you want to talk about the top-end ceiling we saw out of Cam Newton. Not to mention he's getting older. He's coming off a major injury here this offseason with his shoulder. And running quarterbacks tend to not hold up to the test of time. I know Cam Newton's a very big guy, but it doesn't matter how big you are. When you're getting hit by 300-and-some-pound guys consistently game in and game out because they want to run the ball with you, you're just not going to have as long of a career. The older Cam gets, I think the less likely he is to win anything as opposed to some of these other quarterbacks that the older they get, the more experience they get, it doesn't seem to have that big of an effect on them. I don't see Cam Newton as that guy, and I believe now we might be over the apex of his career. We might have already seen the high point where that was the best you were going to get out of Cam Newton. Going forward, you probably are not going to replicate that.
Just final thoughts on Cam Newton. Let's look at this offense and what it was. When he was an MVP, they had all these big receivers around him. They didn't really, even though that run game was good with D'Angelo Williams and I'm blanking on the other guy, Jonathan Stewart. It was, a run first thing scenario. But when he had the chance to throw the ball, it was to big receivers. Now when you look at Christian McCaffrey, you look at these smaller, fast receivers. It's almost like a small step to get away from Cam Newton. So we're going to take our next big leap in here and go into number 19, Mitch Trubisky, the Bears.
I think Bears fans are going to kill me for this one, but I had to put Mitch Trubisky at 19 here, Drew, and the reason I did it is because, yes, he's had some fantastic games where he's showed up and he's looked really good, but the rest of the season, I mean, you take those 2 or 3 games out of the mix, he's pedestrian. He's kind of like Dak Prescott in the fact that he's not necessarily impressive all the time. He's had some good games. I'm not going to argue that. He's done well, but he has a great offensive line. He's had 2 good running backs. I think we saw him lose one with Jordan Howard moving off of the team this year.
But they drafted a good one.
Allen Robinson, I was saying from day one when they signed him, is going to be the number 1 wide receiver for this team. He's totally lived up to that. I think they've got some other guys like Miller on there that are really good as well. I think you look at this team he's got, this is pretty close to a complete team, Drew. And the fact that we saw them fall short, I get it was only by a field goal. They've had some games that were closer than they probably should have been. If this was Matt Ryan on this team, if this was Phillip Rivers or Carson Wentz or anyone that's going to be ahead of him on the list here, this Bears team would be in the Super Bowl right now. And that's why I think you have to sit there and say Mitch Trubisky, while he is good, still needs to be in the C category where everything needs to be perfect if you're going to win, or he's going to need to improve if he's going to move up in our tiers.
Will, I'm glad you could join us, man. It's been a couple shows without you. We missed you. Trubisky, talking about Trubisky and what he is to that organization in the Chicago Bears, let's not forget that this defense has been good. I mean, this has been a great defense, and they've only gotten a little bit better. Now they got a quarterback that has potential. Do I sit there and put him up at the top 10? No, I don't. He didn't put enough consistency at big numbers up there to make me go, man, when you play the Bears, you need to watch that passing offense.
Right.
It seems a lot to be the run game that keeps them in a lot of these games.
And they kind of moved away from the run game too. Matt Nagy has made it clear that I want to be a passing team. I want to air the ball out. And again, even with that kind of going for him, we didn't see him put up huge numbers at times. There were times the Bears kind of had to give up and sit there and say, okay, well, we need to keep running the ball because we're not good enough to throw all the time like we're Kansas City. And Kansas City runs the ball, but I'm saying we're not good enough to lead with the passing game and then run when we can after that. So, I don't think Mitch Trubisky is as good as some of these other guys on the list here, but I still think he's, again, trending towards the top end of our C category.
He's still young in his career, has a lot of time to develop and be proper. Will, we had Winston down at 31.
Don't worry, he came in early because we started from the bottom.
At 31.
Out of 34, to be fair.
Let's move on to number 18. We have Nick Foles. Do we not see a new change in scenery around him to be able to be closer to a 2-time Super Bowl champion?
Nick Foles has a lot of potential. This guy could wind up being a guy that wins multiple Super Bowls, maybe even multiple Super Bowl MVPs. But the problem right now with Nick Foles is he had great years in Philadelphia, and there's something about his game that turned off every other NFL team and said, no, we don't need to sign him. He went from being a great quarterback in Philadelphia to being a backup. Does that necessarily mean he's a bad player? No, but it is kind of concerning. I think Nick Foles, we've seen him play very, very well in very short spurts since then. Now that he's going to be the starter and play 16 games, are we going to get that playoff Nick Foles for an entire 16-game season in a team like Jacksonville that has had some struggles in the offensive line, doesn't really have any great pass catchers? I mean, they've got some guys like Westbrook and everything that they're okay, but they don't really have anyone lighting up the scoreboard. They don't have the pure number one he had in Philadelphia. Right. He went from a complete offense or near complete offense to one now that's really trying to build and find itself. I think Nick Foles is going to take a step back, and we're going to learn this year more than anything, how good is this guy really?
He's a team that, or he's in a team that has to rely heavily on this defense. If Jacksonville's not back to its number one defense ranking like it was at the beginning of last year and what it was the year before that, it doesn't matter what Nick Foles does. It doesn't matter what he brings this organization. If that defense can't seem to figure out how to put on the shoe on the right foot, you're going to struggle a little bit. As much as I like Nick Foles, as much as I like his story and what his journey in the NFL has created to become an MVP caliber player and Super Bowl for the MVP, it's great. I mean, it's a great story, but beyond that being said, Jacksonville is a downgrade from the Eagles.
Absolutely, and Scott kind of agrees with you. He says he likes Foles, and they drafted his favorite player. I'm not sure who your favorite player is, unless you're talking about Josh Allen. I think he's a great player as well. Also, Richie says Nick Foles is underrated, and he is a good QB. I mean, obviously, we said he's the 18th best out of 34. So we agree he's a great player too, right? I think we're both all in on Nick Foles. We think he has a lot of potential. But I think things need to be perfect. We've seen him win a Super Bowl in a perfect scenario.
And
now that he's not in one,
perfect.
Exactly. We're going to see exactly what is going on with Nick Foles and how good he actually is.
All right, the last guy in category.
I failed you, Drew. I said we were getting through it all tonight. I totally lied. We didn't even get close. We're going to round up tonight's show with Derek Carr, the last guy in our C category.
The last guy in the C category at number 17, and Raider fans might hate us, and that's Derek Carr.
You can't hate us. It's not like the Bears where you're like, Mitch Trubisky had a good year. Look, Derek Carr struggled for a couple years, right? I think Bears fans might even have some issues saying you put Nick Foles and Derek Carr ahead of our guy. But look, I think Derek Carr exactly has all the talent and everything you need out of a good quarterback. He's a very good pocket passer. He's had some injuries, yes, but they haven't done a good job protecting him. They've let him get beat up. They've done a good job of trading his weapons away, but they haven't, to this point, done a great job of replacing them. Maybe this year will be different with Antonio Brown and Tyrell Williams coming in there. I think Nick Foles still has what it takes to win a Super Bowl. I still think he's one of those guys that if you put enough around him, he's going to win. But I've kind of soured on him a little bit. That's why I have him down in the C tier now, because, again, it's been a long time since we've seen him kind of take over games and dominate. I just wonder if he's going to be able to bounce back from those bad seasons.
This is it. This has to be the season. If he does not succeed with the weapons they put around him, as much as I know you don't like the Josh Jacobs draft, I mean, now they got a running back. They got a young running back where they can put the load on him. They got Antonio Brown, who is a...
I think he's a change-him-up guy, but yeah, go ahead.
No, well, that's not what they consider him to be.
I think he should be a change-him-up guy, regardless of what Mike Mayock thinks.
Antonio Brown, who is a number one receiver. They got him great other weapons behind that. This is a year that if Derek Carr doesn't improve, doesn't sit there and see above 500 and wins, he will no longer be a Raider.
And next year is a lot cheaper to cut him. I mean, the cap casualty for getting rid of Derek Carr this year would have been catastrophic. It would have been somewhere around like 20 or 30 million worth of dead cap space over the next couple of years. But I think after this year, it's only 7, 8, 9 million. So it's affordable to get rid of him. after this year. So I totally agree. If anyone is in a prove it year or a I need to stick around year, it might be Derek Carr.
And Richie said Derek is going to end up like David, inconsistency.
Well, David was inconsistent because he got murdered.
I was going to say, hold on. David Carr, as much as his career looked absolutely terrible, if you go back and watch those games and what Houston's offensive line looked like and what David Carr could do behind it, I mean, you got to think that, man. They had Andre Johnson, who was in the prime of his career. That guy was elite stud.
Right.
They had
and just like Houston today, they had no one to block for him. The guy was like the most hit quarterback for like 3 years running or something like that.
They had a good run game. Problem is, their offensive line was complete garbage. And they didn't have the defense that Houston has now. So as much as I agree with you, David Carr had a terrible career, you can't blame that on him.
Exactly. It comes down to what do you have around him. And I agree. Derek Carr has been sabotaged. We've seen when he's had Amari Cooper, when they've had a better defense led by Khalil Mack, that this guy can be an MVP caliber guy, right? That he can be in that conversation. He's been to multiple Pro Bowls as well. I think he can get back there still. I think he's that guy that needs some weapons around him. But if you put that around him, if you put him in the right scenario, Derek Carr can succeed. If you don't, he's going to struggle. And we've seen that kind of almost play out over the past 4 years, right? The first couple of years in the NFL, the first 2 or 3 years, he looked like an MVP guy, or at least a Pro Bowl quarterback. After that, once you trade everybody away and the rest of the team fell apart, he was terrible.
Scott says Gruden is wishing for a shot at Tua from Bama at some point.
He may get his wish, honestly.
It's a possibility.
You look at that division they play in.
Brian said David Carr is still getting sacked in his sleep.
I probably would too. How do you not have PTSD after getting run over that many times? I mean, let's not forget, these guys are paid killers out there. They want to hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get hit that many times, yeah, I'd probably still be seeing that kind of shit in my dreams too. I didn't mean to say that.
No, you're good. That's great.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, make sure you subscribe to our page here and throw us a like if you don't mind.
Guys, remember this is Sports Around the Bar, so grab your favorite drinks, join one of the fastest growing communities on YouTube. We can't wait to hear from you.